You know the feeling. It's not dramatic. It's not a crisis. It's worse than that. It's just always there. You wake up, and before you've even opened your eyes, it begins. That familiar heaviness settling low in your throat, thick and insistent, like something that has no intention of leaving. You clear your throat, once, twice, and it shifts just slightly, just enough to frustrate you. You swallow, it doesn't help. You try again. Nothing. And by the time you've made it to the bathroom sink, you've already spent the first 90 seconds of your day in a quiet, exhausting negotiation with your own body. And this is just Tuesday. Maybe it's worse in the morning. Maybe it peaks after meals, when something you ate sends it surging back in a way that feels almost vindictive. Maybe it's the sound of your own voice catching mid-sentence in a meeting, that embarrassing half cough you've learned to disguise as clearing your throat, hoping no one noticed. Maybe it's the 3 a.m. Wake up. That particular kind of wakefulness that isn't insomnia, it's your own airway pulling you back from sleep with a wet, sticky tightness that makes you sit up in the dark and cough into your hand, alone, wondering what is happening to you. And you've asked your doctor, maybe multiple times, and you've gotten the same short list of answers. Seasonal allergies, postnasal drip, a lingering cold, try an antihistamine, try a decongestant, stay hydrated, give it time. And you've done all of those things. You've given it time, months of time, maybe longer. And it came back, every morning, every meal, every meeting. You swallowed again. It didn't help. Here's what I want you to consider. And stay with me, because this is going to sound strange at first. What if the phlegm isn't the problem? What if everything you've been doing, the sprays, the antihistamines, the steam showers, the throat lozenges, has been aimed at entirely the wrong target? What if that stubborn, relentless mucus isn't a symptom of something attacking your throat from the outside, but a signal from something happening deep inside, something that no allergy test and no nasal spray was ever going to touch? And more than that, what if the phlegm is actually the only thing standing between your throat and something worse? I know, that doesn't make sense yet, but it will. Because what I'm about to explain changes the entire picture, and once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Let's start with what you've been told. The first thing most people hear when they describe chronic phlegm and constant throat clearing is allergies. And it makes sense. It's not an unreasonable conclusion. Allergies produce inflammation. Inflammation produces mucus. Mucus coats the back of the throat. Throat clearing follows. The logic holds for a while. If you have true seasonal allergies and your symptoms appear only in spring when the pollen count spikes, or only in fall when mold blooms, there's a real case to be made. But here's what doesn't fit. You've probably noticed that your symptoms don't follow the calendar. They aren't worse when you travel somewhere else. They don't disappear in winter. They don't respond to antihistamines the way your friend's hay fever does. They're just there, every day, consistent and indifferent to the season. Allergies partially explain a real phenomenon. They just don't explain yours. The second thing people reach for, and this one carries particular weight if you live in a city or if you smoke or used to smoke, is environmental irritation. Pollution, particulates, cigarette smoke, dry office air. All of it real. All of it capable of triggering excess mucus production as the airway tries to trap and expel irritants. Think about what you know. Think about a city smoker whose throat is chronically rough and productive. That's inflammation from repeated external assault, and it's entirely legitimate. But here's the gap. People who live in clean mountain air, who have never smoked, who work from home and keep their windows shut, they have this too. People who moved across the country to escape the city and left every pollutant behind still wake up clearing their throats in the same slow, defeated rhythm. The environment explains some of it. It doesn't explain all of it. It doesn't explain you. The third explanation is aging. And this is the one I want to be most careful with because it carries the most emotional weight. You've probably heard some version of it. That the body's mucous membranes become less efficient with age, that throat sensitivity increases, that what you're experiencing is simply the body doing what bodies do over time. And I understand why that lands so hard. Because if it's just aging, it means it's permanent. It means this is who you are now. And that's the explanation that makes people stop asking, not because it satisfies them, but because it feels like a door closing. Here's what I need you to hear. The body does change with age. Tissue does become more sensitive. But chronic, daily, relentless mucus production is not an inevitable feature of getting older. It is a symptom. And symptoms have causes. The fact that you're older doesn't mean you're supposed to feel like this. Don't let anyone hand you that conclusion without a fight. And the fourth, the one that feels most rational, most medical, most like an actual answer, is the lingering post-infectious theory. You got a cold, or bronchitis, or a sinus infection. And weeks later, maybe months later, the phlegm just never fully cleared. You might even remember the exact illness. You can point to the moment it started. And the reasoning sounds solid. Post-infectious cough and mucus hypersecretion are well documented. They're real. But here's the thing. They resolve. Within 8 to 12 weeks, in the vast majority of cases, the inflammatory response settles, the mucus normalizes, the airway quiets. If yours hasn't, if you can trace your symptoms back 6 months or a year or 5 years to a cold that supposedly started it, something else has taken over. The infection was a trigger, not the cause. And that distinction is everything. So if it's not allergies, not pollution, not aging, not a virus that simply won't quit, then what is it? Here's what most people don't know. And I mean this sincerely, because this is the piece that tens of millions of people with chronic throat symptoms are missing, often for years. The real culprit, in a staggering proportion of cases, is silent reflux, laryngopharyngeal reflux, LPR. And I need you to stop right here, because the moment I say reflux, you're already thinking about heartburn. You're thinking about that burning in the chest after a heavy meal, the acidic surge into the esophagus, the antacid commercials. And if you don't have that, if your chest doesn't burn, if you don't feel that classic acid sensation, you've already mentally ruled this out. I know you have. Almost everyone does. And that is exactly why so many people suffer for so long. Because more than 50% of people with laryngopharyngeal reflux feel no heartburn whatsoever. Not sometimes. Not occasionally. Never. The acid never reaches the esophagus in large enough quantities to produce that burning. It doesn't need to. What happens instead is quieter, more insidious, and infinitely more damaging to the throat. And that distinction, right there, is the most important sentence in everything I'm going to tell you today. Let it settle for a moment. No heartburn does not mean no reflux. For millions of people, it means something worse. Think about this for a moment. Your stomach is, by design, a pressure cooker. It generates acid strong enough to break down meat, fibre, dense proteins, a chemical environment so hostile that the stomach lining itself requires a specialised protective coating just to survive it. Below the esophagus, there's a valve, the lower esophageal sphincter, designed to keep that acid sealed inside. But above the esophagus, where it meets the throat, there's a second valve, the upper esophageal sphincter. And when that upper valve fails, when its tone weakens, when it opens at the wrong moment, when the pressure inside the stomach rises too high, what escapes isn't necessarily a flood. It's a mist, a vapour, microscopic droplets of acid rising silently while you sleep, drifting upward into the larynx, coating the vocal cords, settling on the delicate mucosal tissue of the throat. Your esophagus can tolerate 50 acid events per day before it begins to show damage. Your larynx, your voice box, your throat can tolerate 3. 3. And it can't distinguish between reflux and something more dangerous. It simply knows that something corrosive has arrived in a place where it doesn't belong. So it does the only thing it knows how to do. It calls for more mucus, more coating, more protection, more of the thick, sticky shield designed to buffer that tissue from repeated chemical assault. That's the phlegm. That's all of it. Not a malfunction, not a disease in itself. Your body doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting tissue that is under constant invisible attack. You've been fighting your own body's defense mechanism. You've been trying to suppress the one thing that was actually buying your throat time. It's like mopping the floor while the faucet runs wide open. You can mop forever. The floor will never be dry. You have to find the faucet. And here's what makes it even more complex. And stay with me, because this is the second piece that almost no one knows. Buried inside that acid mist is an enzyme called pepsin. Pepsin's job in the stomach is to begin the breakdown of protein. It's a perfectly normal, essential part of digestion. But when pepsin escapes with a reflux vapor and settles into laryngeal tissue, something remarkable and terrible happens. It doesn't simply wash away. It embeds itself. It binds to the cells of your throat lining and waits. It can remain active in those tissues for hours. And anything acidic, coffee, orange juice, sparkling water, tomatoes, wine, even some fruits, reactivates it, directly, without more reflux ever needing to occur. The pepsin already in your throat tissue wakes up and begins triggering inflammation again from the inside. Think about what that means. You could eliminate every reflux event for 24 hours and still inflame your throat with a cup of coffee. The trigger you thought was innocent, the morning juice, the sparkling water you switched to because you were being healthy, has been feeding a cycle you didn't know existed. This is why nothing worked. This is why the antacid you tried gave you only partial relief. This is why people with this condition feel like they're doing everything right and still losing. Now you know what you're actually dealing with. And because you do, let's talk about the faucet. If you found this video helpful so far and you want to keep learning what your body has been trying to tell you, go ahead and subscribe. I share this kind of deep dive clarity every week, and what comes next is the part where everything finally becomes actionable. The first and most powerful thing you can do begins tonight, before you go to sleep. Elevate the head of your bed by 4 to 6 inches, not your pillow, your bed itself, using risers or a wedge under the mattress. Gravity is your first line of defense against the acid mist. When you sleep flat, the valve between your stomach and throat is at the same elevation as the acid pool below it. When you elevate even slightly, you change the physics entirely. The mist has to rise against gravity to reach the larynx. For many people, this single change produces the most noticeable improvement of anything on this list. Do not underestimate it. The second thing, stop eating within 3 hours of lying down. Not 2. 3. Your stomach's acid production peaks in the digestive window after a meal, and the pressure inside rises significantly as digestion proceeds. Lying down during that window is like tilting the pressure cooker sideways. You don't have to eat early, you have to stop eating late. The gap matters more than the meal. Third, reduce your meal size deliberately. One large meal produces far more gastric pressure than 2 or 3 moderate ones. The valve doesn't fail because it's weak. It fails because the pressure overwhelms it. Take the pressure off. Smaller volumes across more frequent meals give the stomach less to contain. Fourth, and this is the one that surprises people, examine what you're drinking, not just what you're eating. Coffee is acidic enough to reactivate embedded pepsin directly in throat tissue. So is orange juice, most carbonated water, alcohol, and energy drinks. This doesn't mean you can never have coffee again. It means you drink it with food, never on an empty stomach, and never close to lying down. The goal isn't elimination, it's timing and context. Fifth, try a baking soda gargle. I know. It sounds almost insultingly simple. But here's the anatomy. A quarter teaspoon of baking soda dissolved in 8 ounces of warm water, gargled for 30 seconds, raises the pH of your throat tissue directly. Baking soda is alkaline. Pepsin is inactivated by alkalinity. You're not treating the reflux. You're neutralizing the embedded enzyme that the reflux already delivered. This won't fix everything, but it can interrupt the cycle and offer real, measurable relief while the deeper strategies take hold. Do it in the morning. Do it before bed. 6th, sleep on your left side. This one has a beautiful anatomical logic to it. The stomach is asymmetrically positioned in the body. Its curve sits toward the left. When you sleep on your right side, the lower esophageal valve sits below the acid pool, and pressure builds directly against it. When you sleep on your left, the geometry shifts. The valve is above the pool, and the mist has farther to travel. Left side sleeping reduces nocturnal reflux events measurably in studies for most people. If you've always been a right side sleeper, this will feel strange for a week. It is worth it. 7th, eliminate tight clothing around the abdomen, especially in the hours after eating. Waistbands, belts, compression garments, all of these increase intra-abdominal pressure. Pressure is what the valve is already fighting. Don't add to it unnecessarily. 8th, address your stress, not as a platitude, but as a direct physiological intervention. Stress increases stomach acid production through cortisol pathways. It also decreases lower esophageal sphincter tone, meaning the valve is more prone to failure precisely when you're most activated. Breathwork, walking, sleep. Not because stress management is a miracle cure, but because the body's stress response is directly wired into the digestive system. You are not imagining the connection. 9th, hydrate consistently throughout the day with plain, still, room temperature water. Not sparkling, not flavoured, not acidic. Plain water raises the pH of everything it contacts. It dilutes and buffers stomach acid. It keeps throat tissue moist and more resistant to pepsin embedding. It's the most boring advice I'll give you and one of the most impactful. Do it between meals rather than with meals. Large fluid volumes at meals increase gastric pressure. 10th, give every one of these strategies at least 3 to 4 weeks before assessing results. I promise you this is not a one-night fix. The pepsin embedded in your throat tissue didn't arrive yesterday. The inflammation didn't build in a week. Healing is cumulative, layered, and slow. And the moment you expect overnight results and don't see them, you'll be tempted to abandon the whole approach. Don't. The faucet takes time to close all the way, but it will close. Before I get to the final lesson, drop a comment and tell me, how long have you been dealing with this, and which strategy are you going to start with tonight? There's a man I want to tell you about. His name was Antonio, and he was a radio broadcaster. Not professionally anymore, but for 30 years his voice had been how he made his living, who he was. By the time I heard his story, he had spent 2 years barely recognisable in his own body. The throat clearing that interrupted every take. The mornings where his voice wouldn't come at all until noon. The colleagues who started asking if he was sick. The management conversations he'd rather not remember. He'd seen an allergist, an ENT, a pulmonologist. He'd been through 2 rounds of antibiotics for infections that weren't there. He was, quietly, convinced that his career, and the version of himself attached to it, was over. And then someone explained to him what you now understand: the valve, the mist, the pepsin, the shield. He elevated his bed that night. He stopped eating after 7. He gargled with baking soda before sleep. 12 weeks later, he was back on air. Not cured, managing, consistently, with clarity. He said the hardest part wasn't the strategies. It was accepting that the thing he'd been fighting, the phlegm, the mucus, the clearing, had been trying to protect him the whole time. The phlegm was never the enemy. It was the message. And here's where everything comes back to where we started. That moment in the dark, at 3 a.m, the bathroom sink, the morning negotiation you've been losing for longer than you'd like to admit. That wasn't your body failing. That was your body doing its job, doing it consistently, doing it with the only signal it had available. It was mopping the floor, over and over, waiting for someone to finally think to check the faucet. Now you know where the faucet is. Now you know what's been leaving it open. And now, for the first time, you have something that isn't a workaround. It's an answer, not a single dramatic fix, not a supplement or a spray or a prescription, but a precise, anatomically grounded set of targeted strikes against a mechanism you now actually understand. Tomorrow morning, there's a version of you that wakes up, reaches for the glass of water on the nightstand, takes a slow sip, and notices, just quietly, that the throat is slightly clearer than yesterday. Not perfect, not silent, but a fraction less burdened. That's not a miracle. That's your body beginning to respond to the right signal, finally, for the first time. That's the faucet starting to close.